It was a deep sense of loneliness in the pit of my stomach, in my chest. It was like a hole, and I was trying to fill that hole with that activity. And of course, I wasn't in a place to take any of those dates seriously, so they were just occupying time.
Welcome to the After Peter Pan podcast, where we explore what it means to grow up and find purpose. Today we're doing things a little differently. My name is Tina Tenneriello, and I'm Pat's little sister. This is the 10th episode of the podcast, and we thought this milestone would be a great opportunity to mix things up a little bit. Pat has invited me to be the guest host of this episode, and we're turning the tables. I will be the one interviewing him. In our conversation, you will get to know him on a deeper level, and you'll hear the story about why he started this podcast. We hope you enjoy the show.
Before I answer your first question, Tina, I just wanted to start by saying I couldn't think of someone who's like better qualified to interview me than you. I mean, you've had an amazing career in journalism, so thank you for agreeing to do this, Tina. Appreciate it.
Wow.
You know, you're practically a Montreal household name, you know, if they could get your name right.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but yeah, no, I mean, yes, thank
What
you.
do they call
That's a
you?
nice compliment.
Tina Tenneriello?
Yeah, one time somebody called this station and they said, "Can I speak to Tina Tenneriello, the reporter in the streets?"
It's funny.
Tina Tenneriello. It stuck, I must say. It's quite the name. The first thing that I wanted to ask you was really get into the name, after Peter Pan. So tell me about that name.
Peter Pan is a boy who doesn't want to grow up. He lives in Neverland. He plays with the Lost Boys, his crew. He gets chased around by a Tinkerbell, who also lives in Neverland. And then there's Captain Hook, who's the villain. And who's Captain Hook? Well, he's a guy who's got a hook for a hand because he's older, and life will knock you down, and life will take pieces and chunks from you. And who does Captain Hook get chased by? An alligator with a clock in his belly. And what's the clock represent? Time. Time just continues to march on. And so all this, for me, Peter Pan represents the time in my life where I was living that YOLO lifestyle. You only live once. I wasn't thinking about tomorrow. I was trying to maximize the moment. And that doesn't sound all that bad, except that as time marches on, I found myself questioning my day-to-day actions and what I actually wanted to get out of life. I wanted to ultimately settle down and have children. And so I realized that my day-to-day actions were not in alignment with what I really wanted out of life. And it was really, really hard to get out of that Peter Pan lifestyle. At times I felt alone, and at times I felt like I didn't have the strength to continue. And I did group therapy, and group therapy kind of put me in a room with other like-minded individuals, some of them at least. And then I realized other people are also going through this or wanting to go through this. And so that's what gave me the idea for the podcast. And the name After Peter Pan came from my personal growth story, which I relate to, Peter Pan syndrome.
Describe what that lifestyle looked like before you made it on the other side. What was kind of the challenges that you could face living that way?
So fear of commitment in my intimate relationships. I had fallen into a pattern of enablement with all these dating apps and this fast dating lifestyle, I guess is one way to put it. And that's okay. Like some people go through a period of their life where they need that. For me, it had run its course, and I didn't know how to get out of it because I had gotten into these really entrenched routines. And going through therapy, I realized part of it was a feeling of loneliness. And the coping mechanism of that was this sort of serial dating or this manic dating that I went through in periods. So one, fear of commitment. Also fear of commitment professionally. Although I stayed with companies for a number of years, there was always a feeling that I wanted to be somewhere else. So this inability to fully commit to what it is that I was doing. And then this idea of short-term gratification versus delayed gratification for long-term goals. So I was always someone who was financially motivated. I think that came from a place of ego. Sometimes I made decisions that increased my financial standing in the short term at the detriment of what I could have learned or the experience I could have gained following a more long-term vision for my professional career. I would boil it down to those two: fear of commitment, short-term gratification with money, and with other, typical pleasures from life. That could also be my relationship with drugs and alcohol. From all outward perspectives, I have a very successful career. I've worked in sales for 15 years and climbed the ladder in the sense I became a sales leader. I was managing people. I was working for fast-growing startups in exciting technology spaces. My career had taken me to exciting cities. So in that sense, I was very successful. But when you're at a startup, it's a lot of young people that are early in their career. So the social setting is, you're going out and you're socializing a lot, which had, brought drinking and partying along with it. Most days of the week, there was some sort of going out and social activity that lended itself to, I was drinking too much. I never dived into heavy drugs, thankfully, but marijuana being so accepted today, I'd been introduced to pot. Like when I moved to New York, when I first started my career, I was in sales and I didn't know anything about sales. It was kind of a high stress, high pressure first job. And so outside of work, I had a colleague who liked to smoke, and then I got into it, and that kind of stuck with me for far too long. And so my relationship with alcohol and pot is also something that I tied with that kind of that Peter Pan pleasure-seeking, short-term gratification scene that I was in. So those were kind of the main ones.
I think that, a lot of what you're describing is probably something that a lot of people can relate to, that could be like a phase in life, right? Like I'm thinking a lot of times in our 20s, like, I could relate to a lot of what you're saying of overindulging in, drugs and alcohol, or, the serial dating kind of thing, having a hard time to commit. But what would you say is the moment, if there was a moment where you felt that maybe this was lasting a little bit too long, that you were like over this and you wanted to grow to the next step? Like, was there a turning point for you?
Yeah, I would say there was a turning point, and there were moments. I had spent about 5 years living in Philadelphia working at a startup. We were growing and we were hiring a lot of younger college grads. So there were people in the company that were older, and then there was a group of people that were younger. And that social scene, I realized that when I was socializing, people were like a decade younger than me. It wasn't a big deal to me. But then I remember one time my friend came to visit me, and he is my age. He came with his wife. I remember I took them to a party, and it was all these people that were, a decade or so younger, and I didn't think twice of it. And so we had a good time. And then at the end, my friend said to them, he's like, "All right, the grown-ups are leaving. You guys can have the real fun now." And that stuck with me. I thought that was hilarious, but I thought, geez, I guess like there's some truth to that. So that was a moment that stuck with me. There were also moments in the morning when I would wake up where I had been out the night before. I just woke up, my head was still on the pillow, and I was feeling regret. I was feeling guilt and shame, and I was like, this lifestyle just isn't suiting me anymore. And so there were kind of morning moments like that where I didn't feel very good about myself. And then the real moment, I think, was in 2019. I got laid off from my job, and that was a real shock for me. My natural inclination was to pack a bag and go traveling, because I always loved traveling. I love backpacking and the lifestyle of a backpacker, which is a lot more of that short-term pleasure,
Peter
fun
Pan lifestyle.
Exactly. I found the strength to pause and ask myself, what can I do with this opportunity? I knew that there were some things, there was some baggage that I needed to work on, that I needed to face. I asked a few of people very close to me, family members, like, what do you think I should do? And they all had the same response, which was, this opportunity is kind of a once in a lifetime. It's not every day that you get this kind of free time. So go and work on yourself, and then you could always go and travel to those places after. I decided, okay, I'm going to do this. And for me, that's when the journey of leaving that Peter Pan lifestyle, or having the desire to, started. And then I started my search for psychotherapy and so on.
Yeah, so maybe we can get into that psychotherapy journey. So can you describe to us what that work kind of looked like and how it helped you, get on the other side?
So I had done a little bit of therapy in my past when our parents split up. I was 13. And so, shortly after, maybe 14 or 15, I'd done some counseling, and that was really helpful. So my experience was a positive one. And I was looking for a very specific type of psychotherapy, which was childhood sexual abuse trauma. I had buried that trauma for all of my life, practically. And it wasn't until you brought it up to me that I realized, okay, this actually happened to me. You read stories in the paper or in the news about how people will take 30 years to come out and realize that they were a victim. And you're like, well, why didn't you speak sooner? I understand those people. I totally understand why people can go an entire lifetime and not realize that they're a victim, because nobody wants to be seen as a victim. And we bury it.
Yeah, you get into like survivor. You do what you have to do to survive. So I think that, yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear that my sharing with you led to you, having that realization and seeking help yourself, because I had a similar experience of talking to, I think I've told you this before, but talking to one of our aunts who shared her experience with sexual abuse. And that was the moment for me of like, oh, wait a minute, like this happened to me too. So yeah, it's interesting. It's one of the reasons why, as difficult as having those types of conversations are, it's a realization that they're important conversations to have, because you never know like who you're helping without even knowing, just by bringing it in the forefront and not like hiding it.
Yeah, I'll never forget. It was around your wedding. It was before we were at Dad's, and he had the convertible out. He had just washed it, and he threw me the keys and said, "Take your sister for a ride." And that was pretty rare, because that was like his sixth child. So we hopped in the car and took a drive, and I didn't really know where to go. So we started driving. I took us through the old neighborhood, and for some reason we pulled up to Dad's old house, and then we went to Mom and Dad's old house, and we got out, and no, then you started talking. I don't remember what triggered it, and then you told me, and then my reaction was, "Oh, that happened to me too."
Yeah.
And now you realize, why the theme of "me too," like those words, like those were the exact words that came to my mind. And then we stopped the car, and we hugged and cried, and so that moment will always stay with me. And so that moment was a several years before, actually. And so fast forward to when I got laid off, that was the work I wanted to do. So I started Googling sexual abuse, childhood sexual abuse for men. And so I interviewed a few therapists, but luckily I stumbled on this program in Ottawa, which is very rare. There are only a few dedicated programs for men for sexual abuse. And it's happened to be in Ottawa, our city. It's called Men in Healing. What I loved about the program was that they were experts, and it was a structured program with a start, a middle, and an end. And I liked that because I thought, like, I had this travel that I wanted to get to, but also because, like, I like the idea of working through a phased kind of process and coming out the other side. And so for them, it was a 3-phased process. Phase 1 was, I can't remember what they call it now. Like, I think they just called it phase 1. And it was like an intense weekend where new people like me, we got together. I think we were 4 or 5. We worked through a workbook, and we learned all the basics around childhood trauma. That was really enlightening. And it was a group therapy, which was nice because it makes you feel like you're not alone. There are other people who share their stories. And then phase 2 starts after that, which is a weekly group therapy with other men who have been in the program longer than you have. That was very helpful. And then I also did that one-on-one therapy at the same time. I did both because the one-on-one therapy allowed me to go deep into my specific trauma and make space for myself, whereas the group therapy gave me breath. It allowed me to feel that I wasn't alone, that there were others. It helped with shame and with guilt. Once I was done with phase two ends with what's called your testimony. And so the testimony is when you essentially come to group and it's your time to tell your story. And then that starts phase three. And phase three is kind of reintegrating into your everyday life and what you want your life to look like next. And for me, phase three was about deepening my spirituality and also my love for my partner at the time. I was dating my wife at that time.
It sounds like an incredible program, and honestly, one that, I wish was more available outside of Ottawa as well, because really is unique. I'm curious, like, as you were specifically like revisiting your childhood and this trauma through this work, were there any realizations for you of, that having an impact on the Peter Pan lifestyle that you had known, that you were trying to get out of?
There were. Now it's important to say that it's really hard to differentiate like the line between where your trauma ends and where kind of the other baggage that you have in your life starts, right? So it's gray, and I can't say for certain that because of this trauma I behaved in this way, because it's not that simple. But there's some kind of strong indications and some things that kind of are pretty clear to me. So one is coping mechanisms. The definition of healing, at least in the program, was opening up time and space for yourself. Make space with how you feel.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're not doing that, that's what the program called survival mode. And in survival mode, you're just thinking of the here and now. And you're just thinking, I don't feel good. What do I need in this moment to feel better, to feel good? And that's where a lot of those lifestyles that I shared earlier came into play, right? That's where smoking a joint is a great way to feel nothing or feel a lot better for a little bit of time, and then probably feel worse after. But and the same goes with maybe over drinking or with dating 3 different people at the same time and feeling really good about myself, right? So I would say those coping mechanisms tie into me being in survival mode as a result of my trauma. The other one is from high school onward. Like I was always very active in dating, and I always kind of took on this persona of being like a player, of dating a lot and I kind of liked that. And I think that part of that may have been from like a coping mechanism to bury some of that shame of the trauma itself. And then on the commitment side of things, I think that's less about my trauma and probably more about our parents' separation. I was at a pretty tender age, 12, 13 years old, and we have wonderful parents. And they were married for 16, 17 years. And I used to say to myself, like, if they weren't able to make it work, like, I don't have a chance in hell. Right. And so I think the commitment issues and the fear of commitment and marriage, that came more from our parents' separation than the trauma.
Okay, so one thing I wanted to get into, is that fear of commitment that you described, because of course now you have a wife that we love very much. I think that it was a question of timing the work that you had done on yourself, that when you met your wife, you were ready to overcome that fear? Or do you think it was her? Do you think it was a combination of everything? Like, what helped you specifically overcome that and able to really let go and fall in love and get married and start building your life with someone?
I used to reflect on that question a lot. And I used to ask people, especially friends who had taken the plunge, I used to ask them, is it you who was ready to meet the person, or was it the right person who came along in your life and kind of changed you or made you realize you were ready for that commitment? And the answer I used to get, you'll know when you know. Like, how did you'll know when you know was the answer, which is not that helpful. But once you go through it yourself, you kind of realize you're like, that makes sense. You'll know when you know, when you have that feeling, you just of knowing. And I'm sure you had that strong feeling with Francois. But for me, the answer is very clear. I was ready. It was right time, right place, right circumstance. And then the right person came along. If I didn't have those three set up correctly first, my wife would have, honestly, truthfully, would have probably been someone I would have dated, and it would have ended like the countless others, and I would have, we would have gone our separate ways. That is the honest to God truth, and she knows that, and I know that. But I'm thankful, I'm grateful that I did that work. But she probably would have not even been interested in me if I hadn't done that work, because she wouldn't have been interested in the Pat that I was at that point. So we probably would have never even had any sort of story, because she was a serious person. She is a serious person. I did that work, and that healing journey was creating that space and that time to realize that one of my goals in life was to start a family. How am I going to get that if I'm on 4 different dating apps, going on 3 dates in one evening sometimes, like back to back to back? At its extreme, that's what it was like sometimes. And it took a while to realize why I was doing that. It wasn't that I was doing that every day, but I would, sometimes I would just, in a flurry of activity, I would go on like 3 different dating apps, just go to town and set up a bunch of dates. And when I stopped in therapy, I thought about what that was about. It was a deep sense of loneliness in the pit of my stomach, in my chest. It was like a hole, and I was trying to fill that hole with that activity. And of course, I wasn't in a place to take any of those dates seriously, so they were just occupying time. But once I had done the work and I realized what I wanted, and I connected my everyday actions to that objective, that's when that alignment, it opened my circumstances to meet my wife. It made myself attractive to someone like her who was serious. At that point, I was still a work in progress. I'm still a work in progress today, but I was an early work in progress then. I had a responsible relationship with drugs and alcohol at that point. It wasn't exactly where I wanted to be, but it was much better. I was being very intentional in my dates. So I was communicating to them, hey, this is what I'm looking for. Are you looking for this? Whereas in the past, even if I went on a first date with someone, I thought, she's cute, but she's probably not the one. Like, I'd continue to pursue her just for the fun of it, right? So I communicated on our very first date with Emma. I'll never forget it. We did this very romantic date. We went to Naples. We were walking along the lungomare, which is like along the water, the Mediterranean. We had a really nice dinner, and we were sitting down by the rocks. And I said to her, like, I'm not looking, they call them adventures, like something just for fun, aventura. So I said, I'm not looking for an aventura. I'm looking for something serious. And she looked at me and she said, well, that's great, but like, aren't you leaving in a week? It's like, yes, but we'll figure that out. Like, you need to know, like, this is what I'm looking for. This is where I'm at in my life. And so that signaled everything to her. And from there on, we had our intention, and then we just, we made it work. It was hard, but we made it work. And I'm so grateful we did. But the other word that comes to mind in answering this question is I started to live a life of integrity. My actions before were not aligned because I wasn't living with my integrity. I was not a virtuous life. As much as I tried to bury my conscience and that voice, like, it knocked up against it. And that was where the internal dissonance was too. Like, I wasn't proud of myself. I wasn't proud of the person I had become. And so, again, to go back to your original question, like, it was definitely through the work and being at a place where I was ready for it that the right person came along, and I was able to take advantage and fall in love with my wife.
When you described this sort of peak Peter Pan lifestyle of sometimes 3 dates in a night, and finding out through psychotherapy that it was a void of loneliness that you were trying to fill, were you able to sort of pinpoint where that loneliness was coming from? I think that it's something that could be helpful to people because I think that the fact that you were able to pinpoint that it
Hmm.
was loneliness that you were trying to fill, well,
Hmm.
that's very powerful.
Yeah.
It's probably something that other people can relate to and that have not had that moment yet of understanding that it's a lonely world out there sometimes, you know?
So a few things come to mind. I spent my career in the US at like 10 years, most of my career in the US, living in major cities. Very fortunate and grateful for that. But it felt lonely sometimes. Like my family and my close friends were back home in Canada. Sometimes I would arrive in a city I had never even stepped foot in, like San Francisco. When I moved to San Francisco, I hadn't even been in the state of California, and I had my bags on the plane with me, and I was moving there.
Wow. It's
When I
courageous.
moved to Boston, like again, I didn't know anybody, and so it was courageous in a sense, but it was lonely, and I was lucky. I had friends and family come visit me and all that, and I made friends, but I felt lonely at times. I also think that persona I talked about of like being a player, of being a womanizer, it outlived itself. Like it had run its course, and yet I continued with it because that's all I knew. Maybe eventually realized like it's kind of a lonely lifestyle. And so I think part of it was just the lifestyle of dating and thinking that it was fun, but in reality, it was hurting me. And I also think this plays into the dating culture today. We want that like fast connection. It's very easy now. Like there's all these apps at our fingertips. Like I adopted many of those apps. Once you're on them and you start using them, you realize you kind of learn how they work. You learn how to get good at them in a way. And so you meet a lot of people and you go on a lot of dates. And I think it feeds into that short-term gratification lifestyle. And I think that these apps and this dating culture, it's not healthy. And I think that a lot of people fall into the trap. And I think I kind of fell into that trap.
A lot of people listening could probably relate to that. You know, I could definitely relate to it that I met my husband Francois before dating apps were a thing. So I never really got into the dating app world, but I did like go out a lot. I definitely had my times of just going out to clubs and bars way too much and
Yeah, we lived
meeting
together a few
people.
years in Montreal, so
Well,
I know,
Montreal
but
is also like very much a nightlife city, right? So when I moved here, like I definitely had that period where I was just partying way too much. And of course, I think what you said about the way you were living that dating lifestyle and the one that I also lived for a period of time fits a lot into dating culture now. And I hope that we're going to see a change to it because at the end of the day, I don't think it's very meaningful. Like, there's no way that you can truly give someone a fair shot or really like give of yourself emotionally, be honest to someone with someone if you're not giving them like really your time. Like at the end of the day, like you need to give time, you need to give respect. And so I hope that we're going to go back to a way of life like for our children, the next generation, where we slow down a little bit with the consumerism and like even consuming like people in a way, like let's take the time to really appreciate someone and get to know them and not waste each other's time if it's not a good fit.
if you declare your intention up front with someone, like on a first date or second date, people like the other one might react thinking like, "You're crazy. This girl's crazy. This guy's too intense, like too clingy." But I remember in therapy, my one-on-one therapy, we were talking about integrity. We were talking about intention, having my everyday actions and my dating patterns align with what my goal is, what I want. I remember my therapist saying, "Hey, well, what if you only sleep with women that you say I love you to, like that you love?"
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, this guy's crazy, man. This guy doesn't know how the world works. Like this guy doesn't know what the dating scene's like out there. And I just thought that was so crazy and so opposite to what I was living at the time. But looking back on it now, like that's not such a bad idea. You know, if I make a rule for myself that I only sleep with people that I say I love you to, probably going to take that person a lot more seriously because I'm going to be waiting longer. I'm going to be getting to know them better. I'm going to be checking in to see how I really truly feel about them. I'm going to be communicating with them directly and honestly. And if the other person reacts and says, this guy's a nut job, this guy's too clingy, they're probably not the right person anyway. But the one who says, I appreciate you for being upfront and honest with me. And guess what? Like I'm looking for that too. The way that Emma, my wife, did on that date in Naples. Like there's a reason they say like when you aim at something, if you keep aiming, like you'll get it. It's like you need to set that intentionality. But I understand the feeling of like people are gonna think I'm crazy if I do that. Like the dating scene is broken. It's messed up. And you know, lately I've been gripped by this problem that the world is going to be facing soon that I keep hearing about on the podcast that I listen to, and that is population decline. And people think, well, population decline isn't such a bad thing. You know, we got a lot of humans on this planet, and we have a climate problem and so on. So that'll make it easier and so on. But people don't realize how big population decline, how big of a problem it will be in the not too distant future. And people are not having kids. Like 50% of women age 30 are single, are not having kids. And then half of those will go on to not have kids at all.
So 25%, yeah, that's a big number.
And so there's a problem of involuntary celibacy, like meaning that, you know, we talk about incels for men, but it's also for women because there's an internal clock there. And if you don't align your life in the pieces, then you might miss your window, right? When you're 40 and you're trying to have a kid, I'm very close to this. I know the stats. You only got about a 5-10% chance of getting pregnant after 40, right? It's pretty low. So, and the reason I'm bringing this up, Tina, is because I think it feeds into this dating culture. I think a lot of it, it's like we think it's fun. It occupies our time. It's like it's part of our culture, these dating apps. And so when we wake up and realize that it's not getting us to where we want to be ultimately, it's too late.
It could be too late, yeah. Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And another thing about these dating apps that speaks to what you said earlier about checking in with yourself and about what you want. I think that the dating apps are also a distraction. They make it easy for us to go through life and not check in and not ask ourselves like, okay, am I living with integrity? Am I living the way that I want to live so that I could accomplish my dream of having a family? You know what I mean? Like it's true what you say, that if we're not doing those check-ins and if we're not making space, doing the work so that we're able to let go of some of those fears that are holding us back, you know, we're gonna wake up and, like you say, you know, the reality is we do have a biological clock, and we do kind of have a timeline that we have to sort of meet to make some dreams specific to having a family come true. I want to talk to you more about integrity because, you know, it's something that you've said a few times now that you started living with integrity. So can you describe what that looks like for you?
Living with integrity for me is aligning myself with that inner voice that tells me, that helps me with right and wrong. So I think that's primarily what it is. And the second thing that it is for me is this idea of aiming up. So having an ideal that I'm aiming towards to always try and improve. There's always room for improvement. So those two things together, aiming up for me is it's picturing what my ideal is and then working towards it every day, trying to be just a little bit better than I was the day before. Acting in a way that I feel proud of myself, that my wife and my son will feel proud of me, that my parents will feel proud of me, my siblings will feel proud of me. Acting in a way that makes me feel stronger, not weaker. When I was in that coping mechanism survival mode, and I felt weak when I didn't have control over myself. Like I remember I wanted to change, but I couldn't do it. Like I would wake up with a hangover, or I'd wake up having smoked pot the night before and not getting enough sleep and saying, okay, like why did I do it again? Like, I feel like there's a cloud in my brain. I'm tired. I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I'm going to stop doing this. And then as the day progressed and I started feeling normal again, come nighttime, I do it all over again. So integrity is taking responsibility for my actions, and it's really listening to that inside voice telling me, you're off kilter here. Something's not right. Something needs to change.
For someone listening who might be stuck in that same pattern of wanting to change, not being able to, what do you think is the key, the first step maybe to get out of it? Would you say that it is asking for help?
I would say asking for help is important, but asking for help is really hard when there's shame and guilt that get in the way. You know, me talking about pot and alcohol, it's not everyone who will do that.
Mm-hmm.
There's shame with that and guilt, and in therapy they call those like the master emotions. Those are like the two big ones, right? But sharing with someone, that's what helps you work through the shame. And now we're so lucky, like online, if there's any ailment, if there's anything that you need to work through, if you go on YouTube, like you'll find a TED Talk, you'll find someone else who has struggled with it. And talking about it, it dissipates that shame. And it's hard because it makes you feel vulnerable. And in the short term, it can make you feel weaker. But let me tell you, the vulnerability is a superpower. And I learned this from you and Frank. You guys, I said this at your wedding. Like you guys can be vulnerable, and I think that's one of your strengths in your ability to connect with people. I discovered vulnerability going through the Men in Healing program, because when I was working through the program, I wanted to share. So I would share it with people, and I was a bit ashamed and guilty to talk about it. And then what would happen was the person listening would immediately reciprocate that vulnerability, either equally or greater than, and share something even more vulnerable or more shameful. And all of a sudden, there was this connectedness with the person I was talking to. And you know, sometimes when you're socializing, you can feel some anxiety, like in your stomach or some nerves. Yeah. That would immediately disappear. So the power of vulnerability to feel connected. And I would say that alcohol is a drug that helps people with that connectedness. Like you could feel more connected if you've had a few to drink, like you're less anxious.
You can open up a little bit more sometimes.
Yeah, vulnerability, it's like that, way more powerful than that. And so I would say that if you're someone who you can feel that you need to make a change and you don't know where to start and you're trying by yourself and it's not working, you're not alone. So many people are in the exact same place that you are. Find someone who accepts you for who you are, that you can open up to and talk about it. And it's gonna pave the way for change. Change is not going to happen right away. You got to have patience. And again, change is 1 foot forward, 2 back, 2 forward, 1 back. It's a work in progress. And writing, journaling, we talk about this in almost every episode of the podcast, but communicating, like writing down is a really good way to kind of think through things and process things.
Yeah. Do you want to talk to us a little bit more about some of the daily practices?
Yeah. Once I was done with the program and I was not smoking pot anymore, and I reconnected with my joy of reading. And it was through reading that I went down the path of meditation and Zazen. It was also through our Aunt Helene, who's opened my mind up to that world and introduced me to it. And so reading, I kind of found my own path, and my own path ended up being Zen Buddhism. And so I practice Zazen, which is meditation in Zen Buddhism. I try and do it every single morning, at least 30 minutes, ideally for an hour. And then after that, I do some yoga, because physically stress and anxiety can, find its way in the body. And sitting for an hour is not always the best thing for your body. So it's also a good way to relax after you've sat in Zazen. An ideal day for me is going to bed early at 9, waking up at 5. The world's still asleep. My son's still asleep. My wife's still asleep. And I do my hour of Zazen, my half an hour of yoga, and I'm ready to take on my day. And then once a week, I like to journal, gratitude journal, think about some goals that I'm working on. and some self-love too. I'll write some kind of self-love affirmations. That's in an ideal world, right? If we're in survival mode and the baby's sick or someone's sick, and of course, my needs fall back, and I put their needs first, and I'm proud of that. Like, that makes me happy. So it's okay. I give myself space to deviate from that plan. But I want to talk about Zazen, like meditation. Meditations come up in many episodes of the podcast, but we don't go very deep. I'm going to have a Zen priest on one of the episodes, so I don't want to get into like the philosophy of Zen Buddhism or meditation, because I think this person will do a much better job than I can. But Zazen, for a while, when I didn't know what my mission was, I made my mission about working on myself. And the best sort of aim that I had was what in Zen Buddhism we call enlightenment. And I won't get into what that means, but that really means is having a very, very rigorous practice to get there. And I noticed that if I committed to my Zen practice, it meant I had to go to bed early. It meant I wasn't drinking alcohol the night before. Mm-hmm. It means I wasn't overeating, because anyone who sits in meditation will relate to, if you've had a full meal and your stomach's full, it's really hard to follow your breath. It's really hard to... I've lost like 20, 25 pounds without even trying, just from my meditation practice.
Wow.
And that's because when you sit for 60 minutes in your body, so there are different meditation practices. Zazen, your mind is in your body. It's in your lower abdomen. And so you're in your body. You feel your body in a way that throughout the day you never take the time to, because you're up here. Mm-hmm. And when you're down there, you realize, like, I'm full. Like, why am I eating so much? But meditation has been like a life changer for me, because there are so many things that need to change in order for me to have quality practice, like diet, like sleep, like no alcohol. And then my presence. If I do my practice, I'm so much more present and grounded that day. I'm lighter. I find that I smile more. I laugh more. I'm more childlike and playful with my son. I'm just more present. And the other thing is in Zen is, in life, whenever something happens, we tend to label it's a good thing or a bad thing, mm-hmm. right? Like, you wake up and the sun's out, oh, it's going to be a good day. Or you see the rain, you're like, oh, it's going to be a shitty day. When you sit in Zazen, it helps me to just accept that things the way that they are. They're not good or bad. They just are. And one famous story that Zen story is the story of the Zen farmer. I don't know if you ever heard this, but
no,
it's
a good
example of what I'm saying. So there's a Zen farmer, and he plows his fields with a horse. And one day the horse runs away, and like the villagers come to him and they say, "Oh, bad luck! Oh, such bad luck! Such misfortune!" And he goes, "Good luck, bad luck. We'll see." So a few weeks go by, and the horse comes back, and he's got like a whole herd of horses that have followed him. And so now the farmer has like 10 new horses, and the villagers all run over and they say, "What good luck! Like, what fortune! Amazing!" And he's like, "Good luck, bad luck. We'll see." And so a month goes by, and the farmer's son comes to visit him. And then the son starts to tame these horses for the dad, these wild horses that came, and ends up breaking his leg trying to tame one of these horses. The villagers come over and say, "Good, oh, what bad luck." And he goes, "Good luck, bad luck, we'll see." Mm-hmm. And then a war breaks out in the country, and the military does conscription, and they come to the village to conscript every young man. And they look in, they see the son with his broken leg laying on the bed, and they keep walking, and they let him go. And then the villagers come over and they say, "Oh, what good luck, what fortune, you get to keep your son." And of course, we know what the farmer answers: "Good luck, bad luck. Who knows?" And so that's kind of a good story to summarize, like the mindset of Zen Buddhism is not to slap a label on things and to just accept them for what they are. And I think it's not theory. Like, I read a lot of books before I actually started to practice, and it's like virtue signaling, right? Like, I'd be able to talk about it with people, and I'd say, "Oh, isn't it cool?" And like, it must be so powerful. But anyone who actually practices will tell you, like, the real work, it's on the mat, and also in your day to day when you're not on the mat, just to be mindful and check in with yourself. But it's a practice.
And did you start with an hour? Because I hear you describing that and it's like, wow, it's like, why would you not do that? It sounds like amazing, like a happiness pill. But then also another part of me is like, an hour, that sounds really hard. So I don't know, how did you start? Did you go from like 0 to an hour off the bat?
No, no, I didn't. I started with a few minutes and then a few
You
more
worked your way
minutes
up.
and a few more minutes. One of the books I read was the founder of a Zen center in upstate New York, and then I joined that Zen center. And then during COVID, they did virtual sittings, and so I was able to tune in. And their sittings are 35 minutes long, depending. And so in order to follow them, I had to get to that level, and then you realize, and then that level comes and goes, and you go to another level. It's like training for a marathon, I guess. And I've done like silent retreats over many days. I've done 5-day silent retreat where you're meditating 10-12 hours a day, and it's something you work up to. And for me, it is a function of the time I commit to it, but I know that there are many practices out there where it's not so much the amount of time you dedicate to it. Like at the end of the day, every practice they're just roads that lead to the same place, and there may be more efficient roads, and there may be better roads that people are suited for. For me, this works. It works because there's a sort of a discipline in Zen Buddhism that speaks to me and where I'm at. But you can certainly do 5 or 10 minutes. And there's these amazing apps like Headspace, and I think Sam Harris, I don't know if his is Headspace or another one, but there are apps that you can do guided meditations to start where they, you just listen, and just a few minutes a day, you'll notice the difference. And that's enough motivation to hopefully continue with it and want to develop it.
Yeah, it's a rippling effect. I want to talk to you about fatherhood now. How would you say fatherhood has changed you?
It's our job as parents to teach our kids a lot, but I think that at the end of the day, our kids teach us just as much, or if not more, about ourselves and the world. So, of course, fatherhood has been completely beautiful and amazing, and I feel very grateful. I feel very full of love, and I'll never forget like the first day we came home from the hospital, and we were laying in bed, like in the same room, and I had Emma on one side of me, and I had the baby in the crib on the other, and they were sleeping. I was looking over, and I just felt like such a rich man. It's probably one of the moments where I felt like the most rich that I'd ever felt in my life. It's given me that feeling of fullness that I never had otherwise had. It's just this creature, right? This creature that has so much to learn, and it's like, and just watching him grow and change every single day, it's amazing. And it reminds me just to be present, to put the phone down. He's going to be 2 in April. He's really good at letting me know, like, Dad, like he yells at me when he wants my attention.
Me attention.
Yeah, I'm just sure you can relate to that.
Oh yeah.
So I've learned, and I'm reminded to be present, to cherish these moments, because you only get them once and they're gone. To prioritize family over career. So to realign my priorities, to love, like the love that I have for him. It's a unique love, right? It's like an unconditional, unique love that I hadn't had before. Of course, I love my wife and I love my family, but it's unique with a child. And also, I would say it's given me strength to push to be the best version of myself, and it's given me strength to overcome and make meaningful changes in my life that I wouldn't have otherwise been able to make. And that's because, and I think people know this, it's easier to take care of someone else than to take care of yourself.
Yeah, that's true.
Like if someone does something to your daughter, or even to your husband, or to, it's easier for you to speak out and defend them than to defend yourself against someone. And so for that reason, it's given me strength, because I want to make him proud, and I want to be the best version of myself. And I'm not just living and acting every day for myself, but my actions reflect on my family. They reflect on my spouse. They reflect on my son. I wouldn't hate to do anything that could affect them negatively.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it gives a whole new meaning to life, and also kind of holds up a mirror sometimes to like some behavior. I find kids truly like they're a mirror. You see, and they kind of reflect back some good in you, and also some bad sometimes. So personally, I find it's a good way to check yourself too of like, I need to work on that. They could be good little wake up calls for certain things, especially
It's
as they
so true.
talk more and more. I'm like, oh, wow, that sounds like me. I could be a little more gentle in my approach sometimes.
That's funny. Yeah, he's starting to talk a lot more, but what comes to mind as you say that is more like our eating habits. And so like whatever he sees us eat, like he immediately wants to eat, right? So like he saw
Yeah.
some chips and now like he's obsessed with chips. He's asking for chips all the time. He calls them paki pakis.
Cute.
So he's always, he wakes up and he goes, paki paki, paki paki.
Love it. I like chips too. Let's talk a little bit about, because you mentioned there the richness that you felt when that first night when you were home with your son and your wife. Talk to me a little bit about your evolution with your relationship with money, because as your sister, like growing up, I remember you were always the big brother who is so good with money and good at saving, and and correct me if I'm wrong, but you put a high value to money, and maybe we're also motivated by money in your career path and having successful sales positions, and obviously with the sales roles too, you're immediately rewarded with commissions. How would you say that through this work, your relationship with money and your view of richness has evolved?
So I've always been someone who's financially motivated. I've liked earning money. I prided myself on earning money. And I always saw like the next job that I would accept would always pay more or give me more opportunity for financial gain than the previous one. And sometimes that meant leaving jobs that I loved. You and I both worked at the before and after school programs in our neighborhood. That was so much fun. And we worked summer camps. That was so much fun. And, they paid, but, I didn't pay that much. And then from there, took a job that paid a lot more at a bank where I was doing collections, like a collections agency for the bank, basically, repossessing people's cars and foreclosing on their houses, making their lives pretty difficult.
The same vibe.
Not the same vibe, and it's, certainly not putting smiles on your face very often. So, but I did it because it paid a lot more, and so I was always financially motivated, and I always was ambitious with my career. Like I wanted to be challenged. I got the holy grail at a university. I got a job with the federal government. In Ottawa, that's kind of the holy grail for a lot of people, and I got that. And I'll never forget my first day of work when they were kind of showing me around. And the guy, as he's showing me around, he says, "Man, you got it made. You got a gold-plated pension, benefits. Like you're set for life." And I just remember thinking, like, what? Like I just spent like 22 years at school, and you're talking to me about when I'm going to retire? Like, shouldn't I have a life somewhere in between that? And so I knew the government wasn't for me. And I had someone opened a door for me to have an opportunity in New York at a startup in sales. I never worked in sales. And so I jumped through that door full speed ahead. I left the government, took that job, and went as far away as I could from kind of the bureaucracy of Ottawa. And I stayed in sales. I did 15 years of sales almost. And it's been very good to me. I've been very good at it, I think. I've developed a lot. There's a lot of things about sales that I love. There's some things I don't love so much, but I love connecting with people. I love helping them solve problems, love building genuine relationships. And, it's being successful in sales, you can earn a lot of money. Usually the people who are successful in sales are the ones who earn the most in the company, sometimes even more than the CEO. But I feel like my relationship with money has certainly changed. I think I've outgrown that mentality. I've come to the realization now that I have my own family that, these moments with my son and my wife, they're a gift and they only come once, and you got to do it once right the first time. And so I want to have the right work-life balance. And so for me, flexibility has actually become more important than the financial piece to whatever I do next, because we split our time between Canada and Italy. I want to have that flexibility to help my wife when she needs help and to be with my son. And so the way that I'm it's a work in progress, but what I'm aiming at for my relationship with money is to live with dignity. And what that means is, I heard this actually from a kind of a wise person who was an immigrant to Canada, who came with nothing. He went without eating for meals. He slept on dirty couches, and he's a self-made guy who ended up starting one of the biggest companies in Canada. It was a total success story. And the way that he described it is, money is an enabler to live with dignity. Once you live with dignity, you have enough that you live with dignity, like you don't need any more. And what is dignity? What does dignity mean? Well, dignity is different for every person, right? Like if you're born in a wealthy family with a really big house, for you to move into like a studio apartment and have a life there, maybe you're not going to feel like you're living with dignity. But if you had an upbringing like us, middle class, like normal house, like you probably don't need a mansion to feel like you're living with dignity. I've already found that dignity. Like to me, when I think about a house, at the end of the day, it's four walls, right? Like we all live in four walls and a roof. As long as you have heat in the winter and air conditioning in the summer and the place is clean, like what else do you need? Like when you get money, what are you going to do? You're going to put fancy countertops. You might redo certain pieces of the house. You might modernize and renovate and add an addition. But like, is it really going to change your life? Like if dignity means getting on a plane once a year and taking a trip, or twice a year, do you really care if you get 6 inches of more leg room or some champagne when you sit down? Like, is it really going to change your trip all that much? If you stay at a 3-star instead of a 5-star, like, is it going to change? So I feel like my view of money has matured. And whereas some of those things may have mattered to me in the past, like they certainly don't matter to me anymore, and I'm willing to give them up. And as long as I live with dignity, my family lives with dignity, and we have enough money for that, then I would much rather have flexibility and time to spend with my family and time to carve out on things that bring me meaning, bring me joy, bring me purpose, like this podcast. That is much more important to me. And so that's kind of been the evolution of money. And it makes me think of a quote by Tolstoy. So he says, wealth, power, life itself, if they have any worth at all, it's actually from the joy that you would get from renouncing it all. I'm sure I butchered the quote. If you think about it, if you could renounce those things, there's actually more joy in that. And when you think of the people who renounce those things, those are the people that we look up to and admire the most in this world, right? Like you think, just name people that like the people that everyone know, like Mama Teresa or like Gandhi or like Nelson Mandela, like these people, they renounce those things that every human being cares about. Of course, I'll never be one of those people, but it helps to reinforce this idea that like there's probably more to be had from renouncing that desire for wealth than to actually pursuing it.
Yeah, it's very powerful. It definitely makes you think. How are you taking that kind of mindset into your next, phase of life, next step in your career path?
When I was talking about that transition, like, you know how transitions take time. And so part of that, when I was recognizing like, okay, like I'm chasing money, but my lifestyle, like I don't need that much money. And really, I don't care that much about money. It's more for my ego, maybe when I'm comparing myself to my friends or to other people, to say, hey, I'm making more than they are. But like at the end of the day, I was signing into my bank account, watching pixels change. Like that's really the change that it was making. And the time I felt richest was actually at my poorest, when I was doing my master's and I'd taken on $80,000 a line of credit to pay for it and was just charging everything to the card and not thinking twice because I knew I'd make money in the future. So yeah, what comes next, right? I mean, this podcast is very important to me. I'm having so much fun doing it. I'm reconnecting with my sense of play and just doing something for the sake of learning something totally new. Like I enjoy sales, but I did it for 15 years. And I don't want to give up sales. Like I want to stick with sales because I think I'm good at it. And I think people want my help and I could bring value. But I want to make space for new things. There's so many things to learn. And growth comes from learning. And growth comes from being willing to be the fool, right? Like being the fool before you can be, the experienced, strong, person that people look to. You got to be willing to suck at something. And it's like, I want to suck at something. I want to learn new things. And so for me, this podcast has already been that. And I'm having so much fun with it. I want to continue with it. Would I like to monetize it one day? Sure. Is it a priority right now? Not at all. Like when I think about my goals for the podcast this year, I don't care if it gets monetized or not. I'd love to introduce it to more listeners. I'd love to refine it. So in terms of, paying the bills and living with dignity, I think what that looks like is transitioning to more of a consulting fractional role in doing what I know I do well and what I know people are willing to pay me for. I'm open to change. That plan might most certainly change. And I think this podcast, talking to incredible people every episode, it's like I'm downloading their brain into mine, at least like for 2 hours. I get to tap their brain and it just opens my mind up to things that I knew nothing about. And I think it's just going to point me into directions I have no idea yet. But
that leads me to my next question I want to ask you is how the podcast has helped you in your personal growth, growth to purpose journey, because definitely when we listen to the podcast, we hear some great conversations. So how have they impacted you so far?
When I interview someone, from the point of interviewing them to publishing the episode, I've probably heard the episode like between 5 and 10 times. So it really sticks. And I'm really grateful. I've had some amazing guests already. So I feel like I've already learned a lot with the podcast. Really simple ones that I guess I knew, but I didn't really know. Is like courage over confidence, like episode 1 with JP. It's okay to feel uncomfortable and to feel like you're lost, but to just embrace courage and to practice courage. And launching this podcast has been an exercise in practicing courage, being willing to put my voice out there. When I hit publish on an episode, like there's in the back of my mind, there's like that self-doubt, like someone's listening to this and laughing at me, or someone's thinking this is garbage. And maybe it is, right? Like I have never done it before. And like, I'm sure there's a lot of room for improvement, but like I'm practicing courage. I'm working that muscle. Like I'm becoming more courageous with every episode. I'm trying to just change one little thing every episode and get that much better.
If you looked at like long-term with the podcast or your overall hopes and dreams, what's your vision for it?
I consume a lot of podcasts, and there are podcasts that I aspire to become. I don't want it to become like them, but I want it to be my own. That would be kind of the 10,000 foot view. The more people that it can reach, the more people that it could have a real impact on. And that ultimately is like what brings me meaning, for it to resonate with people, for them to take away real advice, real learnings, and then to implement them in their personal journey, in their transformation. Like deeply, that's what I care about. If I never make $1 off the podcast, like that's fine. But if I get messages from people, and I've already gotten some messages from people who've said, I've really loved like this tidbit, this moment in this episode, and I never thought about it that way. That to me, like makes it all worthwhile. So my vision is to be able to have that impact on as many people as possible and to present something different. Like what I'm bringing to the table is personal transformation. It's wisdom. There's a lot of podcasts out there that already do that. But what I think my spin is different is like my original scope was, there's a lot of men in particular aged between, call it like 25 and 45, who they keep, they got into that mentality of like, oh, I'm still young. Like I could go party. I could live that social life. I could date. Like I'm still young. I'm still young. I'm still young. And then they wake up and they're like, shoot, I'm like 35 and I have all these things I still want to do. How the heck did this happen?
Yeah.
And so it's specifically aimed at those people that like, they just got stuck. It's really helping those people to make those changes that they need to get out of that and to grow up and take responsibility for their lives, set goals, and work every day toward them. And of course, as the podcast went live, like any startup, it changes, and the scope kind of got bigger because the people I started speaking to said, yeah, that's not really my growing up story. My growing up story is this. And then I thought, well, everyone has a growing up story. Hearing about everyone's growing up story could be valuable in itself. And I'm sure that if we can hear more growing up stories, it can resonate with more people who might say, that's more like my story. And so I thought, okay, let's run with this. Let's make it about growing up stories, about growth. And then, hopefully in some episodes, we can talk more specifically about the Peter Pan syndrome. But that's my vision for the show.
And to end on, you talk about growing up, and that's a question we hear you ask your guests a lot. So let me ask you, what does growing up mean to you?
Growing up is realizing that life is bigger than yourself. It's about getting past the pleasures that you get from your senses. It's getting beyond short-term gratification. It's about taking responsibility for yourself, your health, your life, aiming at something, and then working towards it every single day, no matter how hard and how slow it is. It's about living with integrity, and it's about thinking about others and not just yourself, and empathizing with others. It's a journey that never ends. You reach the top of a peak and there's just another one right behind waiting for you that's even higher. And it's about aiming up and continually wanting to continue on that journey, knowing that there's no end. But knowing that if you take that trip, it's going to justify all your suffering. Life fundamentally, again, this is Zen Buddhism talking, life is suffering. Being human, you suffer. And if you have a child, you'll see that, right? Like if you've held a colicky child, you know that there is suffering in life. Life is not all suffering. And some people, they don't like that word suffering because they think like that's so negative view of life. Like there's joy, there's happiness, there's love, there's beauty, but there's suffering. If you accept your suffering, accept that there's suffering, there's going to be suffering, right away, that's liberating. I think that the way to justify that suffering is to love your suffering, to embrace your suffering, to accept your suffering, to be worthy of your suffering. One of the great books that I read that was a game changer was Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. And that's where, the famous quote, like, he who has a why can survive any how. So I think growing up is accepting that there's going to be suffering in your life and being able to pick that up and run with it and own it and accept it, and to find a journey and a challenge that is worthy of that suffering, because that is ultimately what's going to give meaning and purpose to your life. And it's not about you. It can't be about you.
Without the suffering, how can you feel the joy? Like without the lows, how can you feel the highs? Truly, life is the balance of that. The highs are that much better because of the incredible lows that you've felt as well.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Is there anything that you want to add that I didn't ask you?
The one thing that I meant to say in my therapy that I think is really important, it's important not to be so hard on ourselves. Like I have a tendency to be very hard on myself. And there's nothing noble in a bully, especially when that bully is ourselves.
Yeah, that's true.
So when I was talking about taking 2 steps forward and taking a step back, and if you try and do something, if you try and make a change overnight, like you won't be able to do it. You're going to fail. Like try it. You'll fail. And so the way to do it is to not be a bully and to not be so hard on yourself. And when you take that step forward, to reward yourself. Early on, if I did something like I deleted the dating apps, right?
Yeah.
Then maybe I went and I ate junk food for a week. Or like maybe I went and I got drunk I allowed myself things that even if I knew I wanted to change, but like you can't do it all at once. It's not going to happen overnight. And so I just wanted to say, because this comes up in many of the episodes, like don't be a bully to yourself and give yourself space to take that step back and reward yourself. Give yourself a pat on the back when it's due.
Yeah, I like that. You hear a lot that term, like give yourself grace, go easy on yourself. Because it's true, we always have that voice inside the head is often like, you wouldn't say that to your best friend, you wouldn't say that to someone you love. So that's good advice. We got to recheck how hard we can be on ourselves. Yeah.
Compassion for ourselves.
But no, thank you for the opportunity. And I think that
I really enjoyed speaking with you today. I think you did a great job. I've really been enjoying your podcast. And I think that a couple of things, like number one, when you were talking about your first episode with JP, is like taking risks. This is launching this podcast is not necessarily, it's something new, it's something out of your comfort zone, but taking the risk and going for it. And you could just see how once you take that first step, there's like a momentum that happens, right? You start being proud of what you're putting out there. You start getting that positive feedback and it feels good, and you keep going and you keep going. And that's like truly how you build something. And another good lesson that it is that I think that oftentimes, like, one thing that people can associate to growing up is like you grow up and like you get one job or something. You have like your family and you have a job and you put everything into one thing. But I don't think that that fits like the reality today. And I don't think that it fits most personalities, in the sense of like we're allowed to have many passions. And sometimes that was one thing I had to learn in my career journey, is like I was looking for that one job that would fulfill all of my, like, just make me happy and everything. And the bar was just so high for what I was looking for. And it was kind of unattainable. Whereas when I realized that it's like, no, you know what? Like your job, or like what you do to pay the bills, is going to be like one thing of the multiple things in your life. So I think that your podcast is also, a reminder of that, of like, you don't have to do something just because it's paying your bills. Like, let's also normalize like investing time in things that just fulfill us and like make us proud and make us happy, and not only look for that one job that's going to do that for us. Because I'm not sure. I mean, for some people, maybe that exists and that's great. But I know personally for me, like, that doesn't exist. I have too many different like cups to fill.
And I think on the career side that you said too, I think we do young people a tremendous disservice. I think we lie to them when we tell them that career is going to be the most meaningful thing that they do with their lives. And I think I was in that lie for a long time. Like, I used to think I want to accomplish everything before I have a family, right? Like, get it done before, because I know when I have a family, I won't have any time. And so I was like deep in that, and like career matters most. Career is number one. And I remember thinking also, like, any idiot can get married. Any idiot could be a parent, could be a father. So like, there's nothing, it's not an achievement. That's not something to be proud of. It's like work on my career. But the thing I got wrong with that, maybe it's obvious to a parent, it wasn't obvious to me until now, is like, yes, any idiot could be a father. But not every idiot could be a good father.
Yeah, exactly.
Not every idiot could be a good husband, a present husband. And so I think if I can be those things, like, that's an achievement I could be much more proud of than the amount of revenue I brought through the door for a company, or, having people that I report to me or whatever. So I think in the education system, like, I don't know how that could change, but I feel like in terms of value sets, I think it needs to change. And I think it ties back into that population decline problem that the world is going to see is coming. If we're dedicating and thinking that career is everything, then the other things fall to the wayside, like having a family.
Yeah. And once you do become a parent, that's one thing I find is like, you realize how like it's the most important thing, I find that until you live it, or at least that was my personal experience. Like, until I actually became a mother, it just all of a sudden I realized like, wow, this is truly the most important role in my life. Like, this is going to be, that is the legacy you leave behind, really, I think. I mean, there's different legacies, but personally to me, the most important is like how I raise my children, that they could be proud of me, that they could be happy with, of course, that we're all human and I don't expect that I'm going to do everything right. But that still, at the end of the day, when they're older, they can look back and, they could talk about their mom in a good way, being happy with the way they were raised. So, yeah.
You get emotional just talking about it, eh?
Because I didn't realize it until I became a mom, that it's like it's not your career that people are going to remember you by. Like maybe there might be some highlights in your career that people will remember you by, but it's a lot bigger than that.
You'll have to tell Mixie thank you for making her guest appearance. I'll have to
Did
put
you
her in the
hear her
credit.
too long or what? Did you hear her a lot?
Yeah, I mean, the last half an hour, we heard her a little bit, but it'll add some character to the episode.
Yeah,
so.
just explain. I'm going to go up and feed her now because I think she's crying because she wants her milk. She waited for the milk.
I'm grateful that my sister interviewed me and brought all her expertise to bear on this conversation. And so thanks, Tina. I love you.
I love you too. And thank you for having me. They go back and listen to this, or our kids could listen to this 10 years from now. I'm sure they'll get a kick out of it. Yeah, for sure. Our parents are so lame. No, it's been a great opportunity. So thank you.
All right, Tina. Well, that's a wrap on this episode of the After Peter Pan podcast. If you found it insightful, please drop us a rating or give us a like. It really helps to widen our audience. Thank you again for tuning in, and I'll see you in a few weeks. Bye-bye.